Hello and welcome to Tech Route. Today we'll try to set up a typical React app without using the Create React App command or the Create Vite App command. You'll be wondering why we would want to do that, but let me just give you an idea of what is to come. We'd have a React app set up perfectly well with Typescript. We'd also have Webpack and Babel set up. We'd have Eslint, we'd have Prettier, and we'd have Husky for pre-commit hooks. Now, you probably wonder why we would want to set up a React app without using the popular command. So the idea is we want to understand how these commands even work behind the scene and also get a better understanding as to how React works under the hood generally. This would help us become better developers, and even at interviews, this would give us a good edge. Also, you'll be able to control how your React apps are bundled, and you can add more Webpack configurations to make it even better and more performance. You can control the name of your bundle output and what your bundle output would look like. Also, at the end of this video, I'll be showing you an approach where you can use your bundled React app as a micro frontend, thereby integrating it into another frontend application or into another monorepo of any sort. It could be a PHP code base, it could be another React application. With that being said, let's get right into it. To get started, you can go ahead and create a folder in your system and then open it up in your code editor. I currently use Visual Studio Code, but of course, any code editor of your choice is fine for you to follow along with. First step is often to initialize Git. So git init. Now, once that is done, I like to go ahead and set up the necessary folder structures I need. So the first is the source folder, and then still in the root, I like to create the public folder, and then I also want to create the build folder. Now the build folder is not important, that this would naturally be created for you, but I like to set it up to give me the full folder structure. And then again, just to mention, of course, this is by no means the standard folder structure or file structure in a classical project. So you can, of course, use whatever works for you. But for me, I think this is usually the setup I like to use. Now, once that is done, initialize npm so that we could have the package.json and then go ahead and install necessary packages. So npm init, I could just use the -y flag so that I don't have to answer the pop-up questions I give. Now we have our package.json created. The next thing we want to do is basically install the necessary dependencies we need to get started. So currently using npm, but of course you can use whichever preference you want to, whether you're on npm, bun, whichever one it is. So first thing is npm install. I want to install React. We also want to install React DOM. Now, once this is done, the next thing we would want to do is go ahead and install some dev dependencies. I would like to install npm install Typescript. And then we also want to install a types/react and a types/react DOM. And then this would be dev dependencies. So I think for Yarn, you can add the -d flag before listing out your dependencies. Now with this done, we could go ahead and create our entry point, which is the index.html. Now with the shift key and the exclamation mark, you can go ahead and spin up a simple HTML file. You can change the title to Webpack React Webpack Setup. And then the only thing you really have to do here is to create a div. I think create a div with an ID of root. Sorry, this should be ID. Now, once you do that, I think we are done with this file for now, at least for most of the setup. The next thing we want to do is, of course, create our tsconfig to have our TypeScript configuration set. tsconfig.json Now I will go ahead and paste in my configuration. You can decide to use this, or of course you can decide to use whatever config you prefer. But the idea is this is what I use for a standard React project. And the comments will help you understand what each line does. Now once this is done, the next thing I would want to do is to create basic entry points. So in the source folder, I'll create the app.tsx, and then I can use the ref command to spin up a simple React component. Now, if you want to be able to do that, this is the extension that helps you do that, the ES7 React Redux and React Native Snippets extension. Now with that out of the way, we could then create our index.html file still in the source directory. Now we can go ahead and import React DOM from React DOM. I think this is from clients, from version 18. This is the new way. And then we also want to import strict mode from React. And then lastly, of course, we want to import our app folder. Now once this is done, the next thing is we have to create a root React DOM.create root, and then we'll select the root elements we had in our HTML just to remind us this is the root element. So document.getElements by ID. We're trying to get the root, and so I think we have a TypeScript issue here. So of course this is as HTML elements. And with this done, all we have to do is just go ahead and render our root. Now we have the basic setup done, and of course our React app is almost already set up, because I'm sure from here on you already understand this pattern. But then of course the browser does not understand TypeScript, neither does the browser understand JSX, which is what we use in React. So to enable the browser to understand that, we'll have to set up Babel first, and then next we'll set up Webpack. So before we set up Babel, I would like to create a git ignore file, .git ignore. Now, the folders here would naturally be the build folder, the list, because you could either use the build or the list for your output, depending on what you have configured in your Webpack. And then, of course, most importantly, the node module, so we don't push dependencies to GitHub. Now, with this done, node modules. Now with this done, of course, we can then decide to commit. We can decide to commit our file to save our progress before we move on to configuring Babel and Webpack. So I can just git add and git commit initial setup with Babel and Webpack. Now with this done, the next thing we would want to do is can close the git ignore file, and then we want to go ahead and create a Babel config file. And this is usually named .babel rc. I'll go ahead and paste in my configuration, and of course the repository will be on GitHub, which will be linked in the description, and you can easily copy this. This is basically to help us transpile our code into modern JavaScript, into JavaScript version that the browser can basically understand, and this is for TypeScript. And these two are self-explanatory with the comment I left here, basically for ES6 and for class property syntax. Now with that done, we can go ahead and install the necessary dev dependencies. So I can say npm install at babel/core. The next is at babel/preset env. The next is at babel preset React. The next is at Babel preset Typescript. And then the next one is at Babel plugin transform runtime. And the last of them is at Babel plugin transform class properties. And then, of course, the --save-dev flag to install this as dev dependencies. Now with this done, the next thing we want to do is to set up Webpack. So in the root we could actually just create a Webpack folder, and here we just have to create a webpack.config.js. Now go ahead and paste in the configuration, but of course you can decide to type this out, but it's a lot, so you can also copy it from the config file. But I'll do my best to explain each line for you, and I also have comments to help you understand better if you need to. Now, so this is basically the entry point, and I like to prefix it. I like to use the object pattern because this can enable you have multiple entry points into your application. But currently, our entry point is the index.csx file, and then also with this pattern, you can specify a good naming for your. You can specify the naming for your app basically when the bundle is out, but this would actually make more sense when we build our project. And then these are the file patterns we want to resolve, the files with these extensions we want Webpack to resolve. And then I think the rules are probably the most important things, I would say, because whatever you're trying to do in your React app and maybe Webpack doesn't understand it, all you have to do is look for the appropriate rule to help Webpack process that. So basically basically how it works is you have the test and then you have the use. Now the test is the pattern you want to match with this exact rule. Now for this rule, we want to match all your JS file and .ts files, and then TS and JSX basically. TSX and JSX basically, sorry about that. And then now for the loader we want to use the Babel loader, which we configured earlier. Now to the output, this is where our bundled file will go to. But of course, this is the build folder I created just to give you a hint. But of course, this could be anything. It could be list, it could be whatever name you want. Just ensure you know the name of your output folder, so that when deploying your application, I think AWS on default uses this, and sites like Render uses build on default, so you can of course know to configure that. The HTML Webpack plugin. So what this does basically is, this is what is responsible for taking our bundled JavaScript file and then inserting it into our HTML file. That means we don't need to manually add it. We don't need to manually have to add a script into our HTML file and then to make our JS show up. But then this does that on default for us. And all we have to do here is specify the template, which is our HTML file. And then also this is the browser icon, favicon.png. I would add this up shortly. But of course, you can also decide not to add this here. You can manually import it into your HTML file. As to the minified extract plugin, this helps minify our CSS, and then it also helps us ensure that our styles are bundled separately. And most times, I also like to use it to bundle out my CSS. We'll get to that part when I start to configure the CSS rules. As to the Webpack manifest plugin, this would help us create a manifest when we eventually run our application. And as for the TS Checker Webpack plugin, basically what this does is it helps us optimize the whole process of compiling our TypeScript, and then it runs it on a different process, which naturally helps our build process become even faster. But of course, you can always read up all of this in the documentation. Now with that done and with that out of the way, we would want to install the necessary dependencies to make our setup work. And then you can have npm install webpack CLI. The next one is webpack dev server, and the next one is the HTML webpack plugin. I think this is for the package we have here. And the next is the Babel loader, and then the next is the webpack manifest plugin, and the next is the TS checker webpack plugin, and the next is the mini CSS extract plugin, and then I think the last is the webpack manifest plugin, and all of these as dev dependencies. And don't forget that I explained earlier that the idea of being able to do this manually is to also add improvements into your build process, and that's why we have packages like this and then packages like this also. Now with our installation done, I'll go ahead and paste in the file icon so that we don't forget that. So we have our file icon added. I'm just using a Webpack logo. Now with this done, I think the last step basically is to set up our start script. So we can go here and add a script start. Here what we would want is webpack serve --config webpack webpack.config.js. Now with this done, I think we can go ahead and try it out. So we can say npm start, and just like that, we have our first we have our React app running perfectly, and this is basically what we have. So we can actually check this out, and this is on localhost 8080. Again, we would be able to change the ports, but we'll get to that. So if we go to the browser and we go to localhost 8080, we have our React app. I think I would like to add some text just to help us see that clearly. So we have our React app perfectly running. Now with our app running, that's just the first step. From here on, we can then go ahead to make our app be able to support everything we would naturally want to do. Now I spoke about the importance of the rules here, and currently we only have rules to handle files like JS, TS, JSX, and TSX. So I'll just, to show something, I'll just go here and add the globals.css file, and then I can come here and import it. So I mean, now I can also stop this. Now in our React app, we can change this to maybe have an h1, and then this would take a lorem 10. And so we can go back to the global CSS file and say for every h1, color should be maybe something really bright so that we can see it. Color should be aqua. Now I'll go ahead and start up my project again. So you can see that we have errors when trying to compile our code. Now, basically what it says is you may need an appropriate loader to handle this file type. So basically, Webpack does not understand what a CSS file is. Now, all we have to do to handle this is install a couple more dependencies. So what we would want to install here naturally would be npm install sas style loader and then css loader, and then these are dev dependencies, of course. Now we could go back to our Webpack config and add a rule for our CSS. Now basically what this would be we'll write the test out and then could write out the regex to select all CSS files. And then once this is done, we can go ahead and use our style loader and then also use our CSS loader. Now with this done, we could go ahead and try this out again. So you could see now that Webpack finally understands what a CSS file is. And if I go back and refresh our page, we now have the lorem ipsum with the color we added. But then just to also take this further, I'll go ahead and create a component folder in our source directory. And here I can create maybe users.csx and then set up a component, and then here I can also have something like users.scss. So if you want to use SAS for styling. Now of course I would also import this, and then here I can go ahead and say add a p tag, add the text to this. Now once this is done, here I can quickly just add a style to the p tag and change its color to something more pronounced. Now if I go ahead and stop this and start my server again, I can then go to the page and refresh this. Okay, currently we have to also import this into our app. Now once I do this, you see that we get an error. Webpack also doesn't understand how to handle SAS files. Now all you have to do is npm install SAS and then SAS loader. Now the idea of taking us through this step is to understand that it's a process, and for every file type you want to handle, all you have to do is ensure you have the appropriate configuration, and then you would have it working perfectly in your application. Okay, so we also have to add it to our Webpack config. So here we can add our SAS loader. And here also, for the rule, we can update it to handle CSS, SASS, and CSS. Now we can go ahead and restart our server. Now when I refresh this, you see that we also have our text perfectly showing. Sorry, I apologize for the color. It's just for demo purpose. Of course, we're going to change this. So just to make this look a bit better, we could go to our global and add a body. Add the background color, and then for the H1, I can say I think this looks a bit better, and then for our p tag, we just have a black text. The next thing we want to do is to handle images. So I would go ahead and stop our server, and then I can close out most of this. Now I'll go ahead and add an asset folder here. So all I have here is just an image, a PNG and an SVG image. So we can go to our users components and then import it. Now we import the PSG as image1, and then we can import the SVG as image2. Now, even before moving forward, we can see that we already have error showing up. So when I hover on this, you see that TypeScript is complaining about corresponding type declarations. Now, when you see this, the easiest way to get around this is to add type declaration so that TypeScript understands this file type. Now, all we have to do is to go to our source directory and add a declarations.d.cs. Now, once this is done, we can declare module, and then this will be anything that ends with a .png, and then we can also declare one for SVG files. So for everything that ends with a .svg, so we add the appropriate type for SVGs, and then we export default content. Now with this done, I can close this up and come back to my users, and you see that I don't have any error here. So I can go down here and create another div and render an image tag here. I can render image1 and say test image. I'm just going to use any alt text for now. The idea is to just make it work, and this will eventually be updated. So I can add a width of 300 and a height of 300. So I can copy this and move it down. And so now if I try to start our server, maybe we could just go with one for now first. Take out the SVG. So if I try to start our server, you see that Webpack does not know how to handle image files. So I would go ahead and add the rules for both SVGs and PNGs. Now I'll go ahead and paste this in. Of course, you can decide to type it out or copy it from the file. Now, once we do this, we don't have to install any additional dependencies for SVGs and PNGs. So basically, I think this comes with Webpack on default, the assets/resource and then the assets/inline. Now for SVGs, we can also use the assets/resource rule to resolve it. But then the idea is the assets.inline, I prefer to use this because the assets/resource is usually best for when you have large SVGs. So it outputs it as a separate file and then it makes a network call for it. But when you have smaller SVGs, of course, having it inline is better. But then that also comes with its own problem of increasing your bundle size. They both have their benefits, and I added a description here to help you understand even better. Now we could go ahead and start this again. Now we could go ahead and refresh, and you see that we have our image showing up. I can also render the SVG because I already have the SVG rule set up. Now see that we have both images properly showing up, both the SVG and the PNG. Now what we have so far works, and we can go ahead and commit this. Now, most of the time, for a large-scale application, it will not be advisable to leave our applications like this, as there are lots of improvements we could have. Now, the first is the config file. Currently, we use one config file for dev and prod. For now, this might not be an issue, but then when it's a production-ready app, you would understand the difference. And I'll also show you why it's important to not have one config file. So to make this even better, we'll go ahead and rename this file. We'll just rename this one instead of recreating to webpack.common.js. And then the only thing we'd want to take out here is the mode, which is development. Now, it's important to know that what this file basically does is this is a common configuration for both dev and prod. Now, we're going to have configuration files for dev, and then we're going to have specifically a configuration file for also prod. And then we'll have a merge file to merge dev and prod, the dev, the prod, and the common where necessary. Now, with that being said, we could go ahead and create a webpack.dev.js. We could also go ahead and create a webpack.prod.js, and then lastly, a webpack.config.js. Now, with all of this done, the first we would want to do is we could go to webpack.dev.js, and then we could import webpack. Require webpack, and then we'll just have the module.export. Here we have to specify mode specifically. Now, once this is done, we can also specify the dev tool property. Now, this is cheap module source map. Now, this is what the Create React App personally recommends. There are various values for this, and of course, you could read that out in the Webpack documentation, which would also be linked in the description. But this is, according to Create React App, this is best for development. And then what we could do now is just simply copy this out and then go to Webpack Prod and paste this. And here you could change this to production, and then the dev tool will be source map. Again, this is also the recommended value. Now, once this is done, we'll go to Webpack config file. Now, to merge our config, we would want to import install npm install webpack merge. Now, once this is done, we can go ahead and use it. Merge is equal to require webpack merge. Now, from this, we could then have our module.export. This time around, it takes an env, which is the current environment we are on, whether it's dev or it's prod. Now, we also have access to the mode, but then the mode value is whatever you set it to be. I'll show you that when we configure the script eventually. The Webpack config file automatically passes us the current environment we are on, and then this is going to be an object that would have the value for the exact environment that we are on to use the particular configuration we want to. Now, with this done, we'll return, we could just return merge, which is from the Webpack merge package, and then we'll merge the common config, and then we'll just leave this empty for now. So we can go ahead and import the common config. Now, upon importing the common config, we could just create a helper function here. And this will take an environment, and then it will appropriately require the exact configuration file we want. So Webpack, I'm sure you can already see the pattern we have here. So this would be we programmatically trying to select the exact config file we want to use. So here we just have to call this helper function and pass in the mode. So the mode would carry the current environment. I mean, we could name this anything, but this will carry the current environment we are on, whether it's dev or prod, and then use the exact config file. Now with this done, we can go back and configure our start script. Now we can go ahead and just copy this out and duplicate it, and then of course remove the serve, because that will be our build command, and then rename it to build. Here we can add the --dev flag, and then we say mode, which is what we used in the config file, the mode, and then we call the mode to be dev. This dev is naturally going to correlate with the name of our Webpack config file, and here you can already guess we have the --env, and then mode is equal to prod. Now we could go ahead and start our React application. Okay, we have an error, so I guess this is env. That was a mistake, and then we can try again now. So you can see now that we still have our start script working perfectly, and then if we go back to the browser and refresh, we have everything working perfectly. Now, one thing I would want to show you as to why it's important to do this, you can simply just inspect this, and in our console, go to the network tab, and then I can hard reload this. And then you see our React app setup. This is our JS bundled file. Here you see that the current size is 341 kilobytes. Now, with that done, I will just go ahead and stop the server, and then we'll try our build command, npm run build. Now, this would have created an output for us. This is basically the build file, the build folder. So we can actually run this on our browser. So cd build to go into the build folder, and we can see npx serve. Now our prod build is currently running on port 3000. So we can just change this to 3000. And then you see that our app is working perfectly. Now, just to show you the difference, if I inspect this and go to the network tab and clean this up and then reload, looking at our bundled file, this is the React app setup. If you go straight and look at the size, you see that this is just 50 kilobytes as against the 300 kilobytes we had on dev environment. So Webpack naturally help us optimize our application when we are in production mode. So it's very important to ensure that you have your environment properly set up. The next thing we want to do is, for most applications, you definitely want to have a .env file where you can read environmental variables. But currently, this is not possible, as Webpack will definitely not understand. But we can also, I can actually go ahead and show that. Let's just create a .env file. I can say React app, and then we can see tech route. So we can go ahead and go to our component, maybe the user's component, and then we have another p tag here, that renders process.env. Let me just do this so that the app doesn't break. React app. So if I go ahead and refresh, if I go ahead and start the server, npm start, refreshing this, you see that, okay, so this is 8080, it's supposed to be 8080. You see that process is currently not defined. And then I think because of the optional chaining we had, it's not particularly breaking, but then it's not showing us anything on the page. But if you look at the console, you see that process is currently not defined. Now to fix this, all we have to do is to add a configuration to support external env files, and that would be us adding a new plugin. So we could go ahead and add a new .env, I think .env is what's called, and then the paths would naturally be the part of the files you have here. So I can go ahead and import this package const.env would be require, I think the package is .env webpack. Now we could just copy this and go ahead and install this as a dev dependency. Now I think we have dependency installed and we have it perfectly configured. So I can go ahead and restart our React application, and then when we come back and refresh, I think we could even remove the protection we have here and let it just run. And so we have our environment to be tech route. So I think that is now done. Now the next thing we can do is to take this out, and then we go back to the index.html. Now one thing I want us to understand is the way it works is wherever we import into our index, which is our entry point, Webpack forms like a tree-like structure and then goes on to resolve every file and folder that is imported into every child, and until everything is resolved. Now, the trick is if you have a file or a folder, maybe a static asset that is being used somewhere, but then is not imported, most likely your production build will not have it because Webpack would definitely not resolve that and it won't be bundled with your final output. Now, just to give us an idea of what I mean, let's assume that this is our root folder, but then beneath our root folder, we have an image, and then we could just have something here. So I could actually just go here and create an asset folder just for demo purpose, nothing more. And then I could just go and take one of the images here and then paste it there. Now you see that this folder was not imported anywhere. So if we bundle our file, it will not come up. Now let's try to render that here. Asset, fav icon, and test icon. Now I will go ahead and stop our server and then start it again. Now if I refresh our page, you'll see that this comes up fine, which is nice. But then let me show you what happens when we try to build our application. npm run build. Now without being successful, we can cd into build and then npx serve to serve our build folder. Now this is running on localhost 3000. So you can see now that you only have the default text coming in. You don't have the image showing. If you go to our bundled file, you will see that we don't have that anywhere here. We don't have an asset folder. So to ensure that we can also copy static asset, this is not very important. It's something, if you know you won't have cases like this, of course, you can let it out. So we could just go ahead and add a new copy plugin, and then we declare a pattern. But before we do that, I would just like to go ahead and install the dependency. Const copy plugin is equal to require copy webpack plugin. Now just copy this to help us save time, and then npm i -save -dev. Now with this done, could go ahead here and then we can specify a pattern here. Now, the idea of a pattern is just basically specifying everywhere you would have public folders. You would have folders with assets you want to copy into the build. So you say from public in our case here. Again, this is just basically you understanding where the file is in your app, and then you can copy it to the build, to assets. Now with this, we could go back into our, and then we run npm run build. Now this is done. If we look at our build folder, you see that we have an asset folder now which has been copied in. So if we cd into build and then we serve build, go back to localhost 3000 and refresh, you see that we now finally have the image here. But this, again, like I mentioned, is just for demo purpose, so we can of course take this out, and then we can also go ahead and delete this, and then we can delete our build, which would be recreated for us. Now the next thing we would want to do is ensure that we have hot refresh on. Now to demo this correctly, I'll just have to do something real quick, maybe set up a state which would be count or maybe number, and then set number to use state, and then maybe initialize with 0. Now use state has already been imported for me, so I can come down here and create a button, maybe another div here, and then here create a button and say click me. On click, we can just simply increment number, so we can say set number to be equal to number. Now this would help us increase number, and then we could render it out in a p tag just to help us see this clearly. And then we could go ahead and add some stars to this. Maybe select the button and then background, something really flashy, just to help us see this. And then if we come back to our page, and so we could just go ahead and start our server. Okay, I think this has to do with reading the public assets folder which we just deleted, and I think currently it's just the copy plugin that is using that. So for now we can comment that out as it's not being used, and then we can try and restart our server. Now I think we are fine, and trying to reload the page, I think we should be going to 8080 now, and then we have this click me. I'll just go ahead and increase this. Add some padding and just make it more visible. And then, so we have the button and we have the count here. I'll again go ahead and add a class here to this. Sorry, this is not a CSS tutorial, but it's just to help us understand what we are doing. Okay, so sorry, one more style. Okay, so what we have here now, I'll go ahead and click on this button maybe 5 times, and then we have the count, which is 5. Now going back to my code, say I'm developing and then I want to make changes, which I want to ensure that these changes are I won't have to lose my state, and that means my entire React app won't have to refresh. Now, if I come here and make a change, maybe test, something very obvious, and save this, coming back to our page, you can see that our account has gone back to 0, which is the default, and then our update was made. So what is currently happening is our entire application is rendering, which is a problem, and then that means we don't get to save our states, and that is definitely not good for development. So to fix this, I'll just go ahead and pull up the React Refresh Webpack plugin. Opening this, it's a very straightforward plugin to use, and all you have to do is install the package. I'll just copy the command for now, and then you have to enable dev server and then make the property hot to be true. Once that is done, you can then go ahead and use the package. Now, our use case would be a lot easier than what they have here, because we have our config files separate for development and for production. So I'll just go back to our application and go back to our webpack.dev, because this is just for development purpose. The first thing we'd want to add here is a dev, I think it's dev server, like they specified, and then we set the property hot to true. Set property hot to true. Once that is done, we can come back to our terminal and then we paste the command. Now with this installed, all we have to do is come back here and then import it. I think this will be React Refresh Webpack plugin, and then we can require so this is the right one. Once we do that, we just come here and specify plugins. And then we can simply just call it here, and that solves our problem. Now with this done, we'll go ahead and start our server. And so we can push up the count again. Okay, let me just refresh just to be sure. So we can push up our count again to maybe 5. And then we come to our user component, and then we take out the test we had here, and we add something different, maybe user. And then we save. And then when we come back to the page, you see that we have user here, but then our count and our count state is still intact. We can still take it up back to take it up to 7 and remove the users and then save. And we see that our state is saved. And then this also works for CSS. So I'll just go ahead and update the color for P color to be maybe orange red. And then I'll comment this out, although even if I don't comment it out, the orange red will take effect because of the specificity rule. Hope I pronounced that right. So you see that we have our count 7, and then you see that the color of the text has changed without our page refreshing. So this is really important for development purpose. So I'll just remove the color change I made. Now, one more thing I also want us to note is, of course, I know you'd be wondering, because when you use the Create React app, once you start up your server, your app opens on the browser on default. You can definitely set that here, and then you can just quickly set open to true. Now, if I spin up the server, it's going to open it up on the browser automatically. I usually don't like this, so I like to turn it off. So you see it's opened it up on the browser for me. One more thing we can do here is to specify the ports if you don't want it to run on the default port. So could go here and specify port and say maybe 6001. I'll turn off open because I usually don't like it. So can go ahead and start our server, and then you see that localhost is running on port 6001. So if I come back here, you see 8080 is already disabled. If I go to 6001, you see that it's running on port 6001. The next thing we want to do is configure Eslint, because as of now our React app is fully functional. So I think I would close out all of this for now, and then maybe we can commit this and say git commit advanced React Webpack setup. Now, to have Eslint lint our code for us and ensure that we don't make unnecessary mistakes, and then we also adhere to standard coding practice, I think the first step is probably to install the necessary dependencies. So I would go with npm. Let me just raise this a bit so that it's clearer. Npm install Eslint as Eslint /js, Eslint plugin, and then Eslint application should be Eslint plugin React. The next is Eslint plugin React hooks. I think the next one should be a Typescript Eslint parser, and then we can do a Typescript Eslint plugin, and then Eslint plugin import. I know it's a lot to type out, but hopefully we get it all correctly. Eslint plugin JXXE11Y, and then lastly Eslint plugin Eslint comments, and all of this as a dev dependency, and all of these as dev dependencies. So now once this is done, we can come here and create our config file, which is usually .eslint-rc.js. Of course, you can have a JSON format, and then you can have I think it's the MJS format for Eslint config. Now, once this is done, I will go ahead and paste our configuration file. You can also get this in the description, but then this is just the standard setup for React app, and of course there are others. You could use the ABNB format or whichever settings you want to use. Actually, it works really fine. And then you can turn off whatever rules you don't like once you do that. So once this is done, we can go ahead and save our code. So we can now open maybe a component and see if this works. So already you can see that Eslint is working. I'm hovering on this. I think I told you initially that I actually named this way so that Eslint would pick this up for me when we do the setup. So looking at this, it's telling you that redundant alt attributes. So you might want to just change this to demo. What is this? Webpack demo file. So just to get the Eslint error, and then I think let's try creating an unused variable const user is equal to deck route, and then if I hover on this, you see that we have an Eslint error. So, but then again, like I mentioned, you can always turn this off, and then there are comments on the settings to help you understand each of them. So basically, the main parser is the TypeScript Eslint parser, so that it integrates properly with TypeScript. And then The source type is module. The ECMA version is 2021, which is very recent. And then I like to allow you to detect the React version instead of specifying a particular React version. Now, once we are done with this, we could, I think I would like to leave this error for now. We can go ahead and set up our ESLint script on our package.json. So here I'll go ahead and add our lint script. So I'll just copy that and add here and save that. So if I come here and do npm run lint, you see that we currently have one problem, which is the users which was created and the value was never used. So if we remove this, I think it should work fine. But then just to also mention, there are issues ESLint might find and then fix, but then there are others it can't fix, because for cases like this, it definitely cannot make us use users. So it's not going to resolve it, and then it's just going to throw an error for us to eventually resolve it. Now, I think that's about setting up ESLint. Now, the next thing we'll look at is configuring Prettier. Now, Prettier is particularly important because you can actually say you have Prettier extension on your local machine, and so you can always format your code. But then the problem is when you work in a team and then you pull a code from the remote repository to make a change on just a simple text. But then on saving the file, you have up to 60 to 70 changes. And then the person reviewing your code knows that he's supposed to be reviewing just a line change or a file change. But then he's seeing lots and lots of changes to actually go through, which are all just Prettier formats that were done on your local machine. So to avoid this, we would want to have a global setup on the project so that any developer that pulls this code will be using that particular setting. But the first and the most important thing to do is to ensure that we have the Prettier extension added to our Visual Studio Code. Now, once we are sure we have that, we can then go ahead and install the necessary dependencies. So we can say npm install Prettier, and then we can say eslint config Prettier to ensure eslint and Prettier work together. And then lastly, eslint plugin Prettier, and then of course as dev dependencies. Now, once this is done, we can create our config file, which is I think it's .prettierrc.js, and then I'll go ahead and paste in my configuration. This is just basically straightforward. If you want to add more rules or more configurations, of course, you can visit the Prettier documentation here, and then you can even try it and play around and see what you want to configure. Now, with that being done, the next thing we want to do is also to ensure that Prettier and Eslint are set up to work together. So we can go ahead and add an extra plugin here. I think this should be here. Add an extra plugin for Prettier, so we can say plugin Prettier recommended, and then we save. Now with this, we have Prettier properly set up. And then I think lastly, we can simply add the script to format our code. So I'll just copy and paste in my script. So whenever we run this format, it's going to say npm run format. Sorry, that was not C there. So you see that it has found and fixed changes on various files for us. And so most of them are unchanged though, but if we had things that were to be fixed, I'm sure it would have fixed it. And then the next and the most important thing to do, now that we're done with Prettier, is to ensure that we have format and save on. You can go to your settings, and then you can check for format on save. Ensure your code formatter is Prettier, and then you have format on save set so that you don't have to manually run this command every time. Once you save your file, you have Prettier do the basic formatting for you. So we can go ahead and commit what we have currently. Eslint and Prettier config done. So the last thing we want to do, or should I say the second last thing we want to do, is set up Husky and Lint-Staged. Basically what this does is Husky and Lint-Staged together helps us set pre-commit steps before a developer can actually push their code up. Now many would argue that it's really not important to have Husky and Lint-Staged anymore with the invention of CI, where you literally have CI running on your repository, and before a code can be merged, it has to pass all the tests. But then I also think it's important where you have your pre-commit hook run basic setup like the format command and the lint command, so that the developer doesn't have to push this code up before realizing that he has certain things he needs to fix, and then he starts to fix it. At least before he commits, he can there and then see what he has to do, so that when he pushes it up, I think it just generally would complement with the CI settings you have. To make this work, I think the first thing is to install the necessary dependencies. So we could say npm install Husky and then Lint-Staged, of course, as dev dependency. Now once this is done, I want to add the Lint-Staged configuration here. So basically what this is saying is for every file found in the source directory that matches any of these extensions, run the eslint fix command and then run the if prettier write command for files that matches this format. So that's basically it. And then for what is left with the setup, if we go to Husky's documentation, we've basically done the first part, which is setting up or installing Husky as dev dependency. The next is we could run npx husky init. Just copy that command and paste it in our terminal and run that. So what this command does is it adds a prepare script and then it also adds a Husky folder. Now this Husky folder should not be git ignored, so that any developer that pulls this code would have this pre-commit change on their own code base also. And then the file here should also not be modified. The only file that should be modified is the pre-commit file. So to ensure that we can properly use this, we just go back to documentation. Let's go to how to, and then basically adding a new hook. So the idea is to add a hook. So we could just come here and add. We could just come here and add a hook for ours, and then we could say npx Lint-Staged. I think this should work, and I can go ahead and commit this and say added Lint-Staged and Husky. Okay, so once this is done, we can then try this out. So I could come here and make a change. Maybe create a variable const name is equal to route. And then you see already we have a Prettier, we have an Eslint error here for an unused variable. So I can go ahead and try to commit this file. Testing Husky. And then you see it's already running the linting. And then, of course, it found errors which made it fail. So we can then go ahead and fix this and then try to commit again. So if I go ahead and fix this now, and then I could go ahead and try to commit again. Okay, so currently I can just take something off so that I would have changes to commit. Git add commit. So you see it ran now and then it was successful. So our commit was successfully done. Now the last thing I want to do is to show us how to bundle our application and then use it as a micro frontend into another React application or into a larger parent monolith application. It could be a PHP app, it could be a vanilla PHP app, it could be a vanilla React or JavaScript app. It could also even be Next.js, it could be a Vue or an Angular application. The idea is being able to follow the micro front-end pattern. Now, to do that, I'll probably just have to build our application now. npm run build. And then we want to start up the build server, cd build, and then npx serve. Now our app is currently running on localhost 3000, so we can check that out by going to localhost 3000, and you can see our app is running here. I have to refresh to be sure. And then if I inspect this page, we can see our final bundle. If I refresh this now, and then we see we have our React app set up, 103 bytes. So I can come here and copy this out. Copy this out and then maybe close it. Now while this is still running, I'm going to close it and open, just minimize it from the screen and open a different React application. Now this is a different React application, just to be sure. We have nothing here except hello world, and it's currently running on localhost 8080. So we could go to localhost 8080 and refresh. This is all we have. Now, coming here, I could just go to the HTML file, and then under the div we currently have, I could add a script. Here I could just say the fare, and then the source would be our micro front end. Now if I go ahead and refresh this, you see that we have our application properly integrated. Now I can inspect this for you to see also. If I refresh this, you see that it's also still pulling. I think this is the micro front end we are using, and then this is the bundle of the particular app we are using it inside. So I would also go ahead and comment this out just to show you again, and then you see that we have just hello world. And then I can take this back and then refresh, and then you see we have this here. Now the idea of being able to use this, of course, won't be in an HTML file like this. Will definitely be in maybe a component or a particular page, and then we get that div, and then we just inject the script into that div. So whenever we route to that page, it's going to be our React application, and it's going to be fully functional as though it was built on that app. Thank you for staying till the end, and I hope you're now able to customize your own React app. There's also a video linked above on customizing React Select if you'll be interested in that. With that being said, always remember that tech is a journey, and the idea is to take steps every day. Kindly like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.